The first time I saw him, he was sitting by the old bus stop bench, his body still, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, as though waiting for someone who was just around the corner. He was a medium-sized dog, with fur that had lost its shine, carrying the dullness of years under the sun and rain. What struck me was not his condition, but the way he sat upright, unwavering, as if the world around him had long stopped mattering. At first, I thought he was just another stray. The city is full of them, wandering aimlessly, searching for scraps and warmth wherever they can find it. But this one was different. He didn't wander, he didn't beg, he simply waited. Each day as I walked to work, there he was in the same spot, unmoved, his gaze heavy with purpose. Days passed, and still he remained. Rain came and soaked his fur, yet he stayed. The wind blew harsh in the evenings, rattling the sign above him, but he did not flinch. In the early mornings, when the streets were quiet and the mist hung low, I could see his silhouette from afar, like a lonely guardian keeping watch. There was something haunting in his patience, a quiet story written in the way his head would lift slightly whenever someone stepped off the bus, only to lower again when he realized they were not who he was waiting for. I began to wonder, who was he expecting? What held him so firmly to this single spot? The world rushed by, cars honking, children laughing, footsteps quickening toward destinations, yet he lived in a different rhythm, one of stillness and expectation. It was as though his entire being was tethered to a memory, invisible to everyone else but powerful enough to hold him captive. Each day as I passed, I found myself slowing down, caught by his presence. There was a weight in his eyes, not just of waiting, but of remembering. And though I didn't know his story yet, I felt it. It pressed against me in silence, the way grief presses when it has nowhere to go. I started leaving small scraps of food near him, unsure if he would accept them. At first, he ignored them, keeping his gaze fixed forward. But after some time, I noticed the food would be gone when I returned in the evening. It was his only concession to the world around him, a reluctant reminder that he still needed something to survive. Yet his place never changed, his eyes never stopped searching, and I knew, deep down, that whatever bound him there was not hunger, not habit, but something far greater, something that whispered of devotion and loss. The more I saw him, the more I needed to understand. There was a heaviness about the dog that drew me closer each day. I began asking the shopkeepers nearby if they knew anything about him. Mo shrugged, saying he had been there for years. Some thought he was abandoned, others believed he belonged to no one. But one elderly vendor, her eyes soft with the kind of knowing that comes from watching life unfold slowly, told me the truth. She said the dog once belonged to a man who used to take the same bus every morning and return every evening. The dog followed him to the stop, saw him off, and waited until he returned, tail wagging with joy each night. Their routine was unbroken, as steady as the passing of days. But one day, the man never came back. He had fallen ill and passed away suddenly, leaving behind a loyal companion who could not understand why he never stepped off the bus again. And so the dog kept waiting, morning after morning, evening after evening, through seasons and storms. He returned to the same bench, certain that one day his beloved friend would appear again. His eyes, tired but unyielding, searched every face that descended from the bus, only to sink back into sorrow when he saw strangers instead. The story pierced me deeply. I imagined the moment of realization that never came for him. Dogs do not comprehend death as we do. For him, there was only absence, and in that absence, hope. It was not hope that lifted him, but hope that chained him, binding him to the spot where he last saw his master. As I listened, my chest tightened with both grief and admiration. Grief for the dog's endless longing, and admiration for his unwavering loyalty. In a world where people often leave one another without a second thought, here was a creature teaching a lesson on devotion without ever speaking a word. I began to see him not just as a dog, but as a keeper of memory. He embodied something we humans often forget, that love is not measured by time, but by presence. He lived not for himself, but for the bond he could not release. And I wondered if, perhaps, the man he waited for might, in some way, be kept alive through this quiet vigil. I started staying with him longer, sitting on the bench beside him after work. At first, he didn't acknowledge me, his gaze still locked on the road. But sometimes, just for a moment, his eyes would flick toward me, as if to say he recognized I was there. And in those brief glances, I felt both the weight of his sorrow and the beauty of his heart. Winter came with its biting winds and gray skies, and still he waited. His body had grown thinner, his fur rougher, yet the light of expectation in his eyes did not dim. I brought him food more regularly, sometimes blankets when the nights grew too cold. Still, he never left the bus stop. That bench, that corner of the street, had become his world of waiting. I began to realize that perhaps this was not just his story, it was becoming mine too. Each day I sat beside him, I felt my own heart soften, as if his silence was teaching me things I had forgotten. In his stillness, I felt the echo of my own losses, the loved ones I never got to say goodbye to, the unanswered questions of life that lingered like shadows. Somehow, this dog was holding a mirror to the part of me that still longed for closure. One evening, after work, I found him lying down instead of sitting as usual. His breaths were shallow, his head resting on the cold ground. I knelt beside him, gently stroking his fur. For the first time, he leaned into my touch, as if surrendering, as if finally allowing someone to share the burden he had carried alone. His eyes, though heavy, still lifted toward the road, still waiting, still hoping. That night, he didn't rise again. He passed quietly at the spot where he had spent years keeping vigil. There was no dramatic cry, no final struggle, only a peaceful stillness, as if he had finally reunited with the one he had been waiting for all along. I sat there long after, the streetlights casting their pale glow, cars rushing by, unaware of the silent farewell that had just taken place. I felt a heaviness, but also a strange peace. He had taught me something I would never forget, that loyalty is not weakness, and that love, even when it breaks us, is the most powerful force we can hold. The next day, I returned with flowers. I laid them where he had waited so long, a quiet gesture to honor a life that had spoken without words. People walked by, some pausing, some not, but I knew that he had left behind more than sorrow. He had left behind a reminder of what it means to love fully, to wait even when the world tells you to move on, and to hold on to hope when everything else fades. And as I walked away, I carried with me the weight of his lesson, that devotion does not die with absence. It lives on in the hearts it touches. Sometimes the quietest lives tell the loudest stories. The dog who waited every day was more than a stray. He was a testament to love that endures beyond loss. His vigil was not just for his master, it was for all of us, a reminder of what it means to remain true to the bonds we cherish. May we carry his lesson with us, choosing loyalty over indifference, compassion over neglect, and love over fear. If this story touched you, please like, share, and leave your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to Mindset Tales for more heartfelt stories.